in Baltimore, a recent report by the Open Society Institute looked into the city's intensive restorative practices program. The program, which was introduced in 2018, aims to improve school climates in part by building better relationships between students and teachers, and those initial efforts certainly appear to be promising. A year later, 14 test schools implemented the model. Johns Hopkins University found suspensions decreased by nearly half. So we're joined now by Karen Weber for a little more insight into this. Karen, you are the director of the Education and Youth Development Program at the Open Society Institute in Baltimore. So thanks for joining us. I think, restorative practices may be something that people are not as familiar with. As I understand it, and you can kind of clarify, it was a little bit of a reaction to the zero tolerance philosophy that we had seen sweeping across the country, which resulted in a lot of suspensions. We would sort of occasionally report on these oddball stories of, a kindergartner being suspended for bringing a toy axe to school or something along those lines, but also some clear biases in who was suspended, who received the most punitive punishments, particularly minority kids, African American kids. So explain to us how restorative practices was meant to sort of correct what had been going wrong and what the main goal of restorative practices is.
Yeah, restorative practices is really not new to humans. We found that people, Maori people in Africa, Native Americans use this practice to resolve conflict. What was absent in the zero tolerance policies is that no children were even asked what the behavior stemmed from, why they were involved in the activity, and what they could do to amend the harm. Restorative practices really has children responding to what's going on in their lives and explaining what their behavior was about. What we saw with children just being sent out, like you did X, so you get 2 days and off you go home. First of all, home is not always monitored. Many children found their way into juvenile justice issues just because they were unsupervised. Additionally, when they returned to school, they were way behind from the children who were in class, ordinarily. So what we saw is that children who were suspended, they were failing out of school. They were disengaging from school, dropping out of school. And they were also, unfortunately, often involved in criminal and juvenile justice issues. So this was not a solution to having all of our children educated and given the education that they deserve. It's a very simple process. Most schools who institute restorative practices do so by having children sit in a circle and check in the beginning of the day. And the check-in can be 15 to 20 minutes. It's an open-ended question. The teacher is not in charge. The teacher is the facilitator. And the question can be as simple as, what was your weekend like? And you'll find things to be very interesting in terms of what's happening in our children's lives. It also gives you an indication of the children who are struggling in their own personal lives and also academically. So it's a holistic approach to teaching the whole child, which is something we used to do historically. We used to know the children in our room. Teacher turnover wasn't the problem that it is in many urban areas and other areas around the country. So there was a relationship that already existed. This is a process that helps you get to that relationship so that you know the children who are in front of you.
And you used those restorative practices while you were teaching yourself. So how did they transform your classroom and impact the mentality of your students and also the faculty?
Well, I'm going to say that restorative practices are what enabled me to become a teacher. I was not a teacher the first year. I'm a lawyer by training, and the first year I was just sort of going through the process and doing what I was told to do, but I was not connecting to the children in my room. I didn't understand the different struggles that they were facing. 85% of the children in our school system in Baltimore are poor. Another 80% are African American, 10% Latino. So these are children who have struggles embedded in their lives. And so here I am trying to talk about some great literature, and they may have been evicted the prior week. They may have suffered numerous traumas. And that's a no to me. And so when I see this behavior where they just maybe escalate and they're, really angry, I don't have any framework to deal with that. When I was able the next year, my second year in teaching, to learn about restorative practices and to have children sitting in a circle and talking about who they are and what their experiences are, and relating that to the literature that we were learning, and making the literature more appropriate to their experience, suddenly I became a teacher, and I also became a student. I was learning about them, they were learning about the world, and they were learning from each other. It's a beautiful process. It's not just about discipline. It's not just about relationships in terms of, oh, we're all friends now. But it's really relating to and getting to the humanity for the children and adults in your school and in your building, in your classroom. So it really changed my classroom. Everybody didn't use it because it was optional, which is a problem. When you're implementing restorative practices, everybody in the school needs to use it. And I mean everybody, the lunch lady, the secretary who sits at the front desk, the principal, everyone needs to use it because it changes your approach to the children. And you go from a deficit approach to a success approach. Like, I want you to be part of this community. And I want to have conversations with you so I can get to the root of whatever problems we're having so that you can be a part of this community.
So this sounds very interesting, but I know that there is no philosophy or program without its flaws. And I think it's got to be challenging when you're dealing with a classroom of 25, 32. It's a lot easier to just say, go down to the principal's office because you're the one kid that is disrupting this classroom. You're obviously giving teachers a whole new sort of set of tools that they have to use. Where are the challenges when it comes to this program? In what areas are you seeing that maybe it needs to be tweaked, it needs to evolve, it doesn't work exactly as you'd like it to?
Oh, that's an excellent question. And one of the biggest challenges is I think that some districts or some schools think that they can read the book and just tell teachers, okay, go do this thing. No, it takes a lot more than that. I mean, in Baltimore City, the reason we were able to have this success is that the entire school building was given 2 days of training. And thereafter, there was coaching. Coaches who are trained restorative facilitators went out to those schools twice a week, sometimes less, sometimes once a week, but they went out consistently. And they help those teachers who are struggling with the practice. It's not intuitive to everyone. For some classrooms, the teachers are already restorative, and this just gives them some language and some practices that help them in the process. The other thing we did, though, is we prepared some tools. We prepared an entire lesson plan guidebook, and we used teachers who were restorative practitioners to put that guidebook together. And it has a million circle starters. It has lesson plans. And so that after you've had your training, you have a guidebook to walk in and begin the practice anew. Of course, this practice gets better with practice. It also gets better with coaching. Without the coaching and training, it's not going to work automatically for everyone. But if it's a whole school practice, that's the other thing that we stress and recommend. If this is being done for the entire school, then everybody is on the same page. And all the students know when I go to this class on this day, this is what our process is. One of my favorite videos, we shot many videos so that teachers could see what this looked like before they engaged in it. And one of my favorite videos has about 35 middle schoolers sitting in a circle with one teacher facilitator talking about what they want to do when they go to high school. So this is something that is an excellent practice. Like anything else, big change often has big pushback. If the leaders are not on board, it's not going to stick. It has to come from the top down and from the bottom up. The students also need to be trained in the practice. And what you'll find in a very short time is that students will ask for circles to resolve conflicts rather than fighting or taking it into their own hands. What you'll also find is that students will begin to suggest, these are the things we need to discuss. This is the circle that we need to have at this moment. So, for example, when we see all of the uprising that happened across the United States of America regarding Black Lives Matter, it would be crazy to go into a school building and not have a discussion about that. And that's what we were doing as educators. We were acting as if the outside world and the inside schoolhouse had no correlation. And that makes school feel and seem very irrelevant. So this brings the world into the schoolhouse and gives you an opportunity to examine it and to examine your own reaction to what's happening outside of school and also inside of school.
Really, really fascinating. Thank you, Karen. Really interesting. I think our viewers will get a lot out of this. Karen Weber, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.